Joy family, welcome to the Joyful House and welcome to Once Upon a Storybook. And we are continuing to read the Anne of Green Gables series. We are in book number 4, Anne of Windy Poplars, and today we are going to be reading chapter 7 and 8. So if you are ready for this adventure, then sit back, relax, get comfortable, and let's see where this adventure takes us today. Chapter 7. And it looks like we are starting off with a letter. And it says, Windy Poplars, January 5th. The streets where ghosts should walk. My esteemed friend. That isn't anything Aunt Chatty's grandmother wrote. It's only something she would have written if she had thought of it. I've made a New Year's resolution to write sensible love letters. Do you suppose such a thing is possible? I have left dear Green Gables, but I have returned to dear Windy Poplars. Rebecca Dew had a fire lighted in the tower room for me and a hot water bottle in the bed. I'm so glad I like Windy Poplars. It would be dreadful to live in a place I didn't like, that didn't seem friendly to me, that didn't say, I'm glad you're back. Windy Poplars does. It's a bit old-fashioned and a bit prim, but it likes me. And I was glad to see Aunt Kate and Aunt Chatty and Rebecca Dew again. I can't help seeing their funny sides, but I love them well for all of that. Rebecca Dew said such a nice thing to me yesterday. Spooks Lane has been a different place since you came here, Miss Shirley. I'm glad you liked Catherine, Gilbert. She was surprisingly nice to you. It's amazing to find how nice she can be when she tries. And I think she is just as much amazed at it herself as anyone else. She had no idea it would be so easy. It's going to make so much difference in school having a vice that you can really work with. She is going to change her boarding house, and I've already persuaded her to get that velvet hat and have not yet given up hope of persuading her to sing in the choir. Mr. Hamilton's dog came down yesterday and chived Dusty Miller. This is the last straw, said Rebecca Dew. And with her red cheeks redder still, her chubby back shaken with anger, and in such a hurry that she put her hat on hindside before and never knew it, she toddled up the road and gave Mr. Hamilton quite a large piece of her mind. I can just see his foolish, amiable face while he was listening to her. I do not like that cat, she told me, but he is ours, and no Hamilton dog is going to come here and give him impudence in his own backyard. He only chased your cat in fun, said Jabez Hamilton. The Hamilton ideas of fun are different from the McCumber ideas of fun, or the McLean ideas of fun, or, if it comes to that, the Dew ideas of fun, I told him. Tut, tut, you must have had cabbage for dinner, Miss Dew, said he. No, I said, but I could have had. Mrs. Captain McCumber didn't sell all her cabbages last fall and leave her family without any because the price was so good. There are some people, says I, that can't hear anything because of the jingle in their pocket. And I left that to sink in. But what could you expect from a Hamilton? Low scum. There is a crimson star hanging low over the white Storm King. I wish you were here to watch it with me. If you were, I really think it would be more than a moment of esteem and friendship. January 12th. Little Elizabeth came over 2 nights ago to find out if I could tell her what peculiar kind of terrible animals Papal bulls were, and to tell me tearfully that her teacher had asked her to sing at a concert the public school is getting up, but that Mrs. Campbell put her foot down and said no, most decidedly. When Elizabeth attempted to plead, Miss Campbell said, Have the goodness not to talk back to me, Elizabeth, if you please. Little Elizabeth wept a few bitter tears in the tower room that night and said she felt it would make her Lizzie forever. She could never be any of her other names again. Last week I loved God. This week I don't, she said defiantly. All her class were taking part in the program and she felt like a leopard. I think the sweet thing meant she felt like a leper, and that was sufficiently dreadful. Darling Elizabeth must not feel like a leper. So I manufactured an errand to the Evergreens next evening. The woman, who might really have lived before the flood, because she looked so ancient, gazed at me oddly out of great gray, expressionless eyes and showed me grimly into the drawing room and went to tell Mrs. Campbell that I had asked for her. I don't think there has been any sunshine in that drawing room since the house was built. There was a piano, but I'm sure it could have never been played on. Stiff chairs, covered with silk brocade, stood against the walls, and all the furniture stood against the wall except a central marble-top table, and none of it seemed to be acquainted with the rest. Mrs. Campbell came in. I have never seen her before. She has a fine, sculptured old face that might have been a man's with black eyes and black bushy brows under frosty hair. She is not quite eschewed all vain adornment of the body, for she wore large black onyx earrings that reached to her shoulders. She was painfully polite to me, and I was painlessly polite to her. We sat and exchanged civilities about the weather for a few moments, both as Tacitus remarked a few thousand years ago, with countenances adjusted to the occasion. I told her truthfully that I had come to see if she would lend me the Reverend James Wallace Campbell's memoirs for a short time, because I understood there was a good deal about the early history of Prince Country in them which I wished to make use of in school. Mrs. Campbell thawed quite markedly, and summoning Elizabeth, told her to go up to her room and bring down the memoirs. Elizabeth's face showed signs of tears, and Mrs. Campbell condescended to explain that it was because little Elizabeth's teacher had sent another note begging that she be allowed to sing at the concert, and that she, Miss Campbell, had written a very stingy reply which little Elizabeth would have to carry to her teacher the next morning. I do not approve of children of Elizabeth's age singing in public, said Miss Campbell. It tends to make them bold and forward. As if anything could make little Elizabeth bold and forward. I think perhaps you are wise, Miss Campbell, I remarked in my most patronizing tone. In any event, Mabel Phillips is going to sing, and I am told that her voice is really so wonderful that she'll make all the others seem as nothing. No doubt it is much better that Elizabeth should not appear in competition with her. Mrs. Campbell's face was a study. She may be Campbell outside, but she is Pringle at the core. She said nothing, however, and I knew the psychological moment for stopping. I thanked her for the memoirs and came away. The next evening, when little Elizabeth came to the garden gate for her milk, her pale, flower-like face was literally a star. She told me that Miss Campbell had told her that she might sing after all, if she were careful not to let herself get puffed up about it. You see, Rebecca Dew had told me that the Phillips and the Campbell clans have always been rivals in the matter of good voices. I gave Elizabeth a bit of a picture for Christmas to hang above her bed, just a light dappled woodland path leading up a hill to a quaint little house among some trees. Little Elizabeth says she is not so frightened now to go to sleep in the dark, because as soon as she gets into bed she pretends that she is walking up the path to the house, and that she goes inside and is all lighted and her father is there. Poor darling, I can't help detesting that father of hers. January 19th. There was a dance at Carrie Pringle's last night. Catherine was there in a dark red silk with the new side flounces, and her hair had been done by a hairdresser. Would you believe it? People who had known her ever since she came to teach in Summerside actually asked one another who she was when she came into the room. But I think it was less the dress and hair that made the difference, that some indefinable change in herself. Always before when she was out with people, sorry you guys. Always before when she was out with people, her attitude seemed to be, these people bore me. I expect I bore them, and I hope I do. But last night it was as if she had set lighted candles in all the windows of her house of life. I've had a hard time winning Catherine's friendship, but nothing worthwhile is ever easy come by, and I've always felt that her friendship would be worthwhile. Aunt Chatty has been in bed for 2 days with a feverish cold and thinks she may have the doctor tomorrow in case she has taken pneumonia. So Rebecca Dew, her head tied up in a towel, has been cleaning the house madly all day to get it perfect in order before the doctor's possible visit. Now she's in the kitchen ironing Aunt Chatty's white cotton nightie with the crochet yoke so that it will be ready for her to slip over her flannel one. It was spotlessly clean before, but Rebecca Dew thought it was not quite a good collar from lying in the bureau drawer. January 28th. January so far has been a month of cold, gray days, with an occasional storm whirling across the harbor and filling Spook's Lane with drifts. But last night, we had a silver thaw, and today the sun shone. My Maple Grove was a place of unimaginable splendors. Even the commonplaces had been made lovely. Every bit of wire fencing was a wonder of crystal lace. Rebecca Dew has been poring this evening over one of my magazines containing an article on types of fair women, illustrated by photographs. Wouldn't it be lovely, Miss Shirley, if someone could just wave a wand and make everybody beautiful? She said wistfully. Just fancy my feelings, Miss Shirley, if I suddenly found myself beautiful. But then, with a sigh, if we were all beauties, who would do the work? All right, moving on to Chapter 8. I'm so tired, sighed Cousin Ernestine Bugle, dropping into her chair at the Windy Poplars supper table. I'm afraid sometimes to sit down for fear I'll never be able to get up again. Cousin Ernestine, a cousin 3 times removed of the late Captain Macumber, but still, as Aunt Kate used to reflect, much too close, had walked in from Lowville that afternoon for a visit to Windy Poplars. It cannot be said that either of the widows had welcomed her very heartily, in spite of the sacred ties of family. Cousin Ernestine was not an exhilarating person, being one of those unfortunates who are constantly worrying not only about their own affairs, but everybody else's as well, and will not give themselves or others any rest at all. The very look of her, Rebecca Dew declared, made you feel like life was a vale of tears. Certainly Cousin Ernestine was not beautiful, and it was extremely doubtful if she ever had been. She had a dry, pinched little face, faded pale blue eyes, several badly placed moles, and a whining voice. She wore a rusty black dress and a decrepit neckpiece of Hudson seal, which she could not remove even at the table because she was afraid of draughts. Rebecca Dew might have sat at the table with them had she wished, for the widows did not regard Cousin Ernestine as any particular company. But Rebecca always declared she couldn't savor her victuals in that old killjoy society. She preferred to eat her morsels in the kitchen, but that did not prevent her Sorry about that phone call. All right. As we were reading. She preferred to eat her morsels in the kitchen, but that did not prevent her from saying her say as she waited on the table. Likely it's the spring getting into your bones, she remarked unsympathetically. Ah, I hope it's only that, Miss Dew, but I'm afraid I'm like poor Mrs. Oliver Gage. She ate mushrooms last summer, but there must have been a toadstool among them, for she's never felt the same since. But you can't have been eating mushrooms as early as this, said Aunt Chatty. No, but I'm afraid I've ate something else. Don't try to cheer me up, Charlotte. You mean well, but it ain't no use. I've been through too much. Are you sure there ain't a spider in that cream jug, Kate? I'm afraid I saw one when you poured my cup. We have never had spiders in our cream jug, said Rebecca Dew ominously, and slammed the kitchen door. Maybe it was only a shatter, said Cousin Ernestine meekly. My eyes ain't what they were. I'm afraid I'll soon be blind. That reminds me, I dropped in to see Martha McKay this afternoon, and she was feeling feverish and all out in some kind of a rash. Looks to me as though you had the measles, I told her. Likely they'll leave you almost blind. Your family all have weak eyes. I thought she ought to be prepared. Her mother isn't well either. The doctor says it's indigestion, but I'm afraid it's a growth. And if you have to have an operation and take chloroform, I told her, I'm afraid you'll never come out of it. Remember, you're a Hillis, and the Hillises all had weak hearts. Your father died of heart failure, you know. At 87, said Rebecca Dew, whisking away a plate. And you know 70 is the Bible limit, said Aunt Chatty cheerfully. Cousin Ernestine helped herself to a 3rd teaspoon of sugar and stirred her tea sadly. So King David said, Charlotte, but I'm afraid David wasn't a very nice man in some respects. Anne caught Aunt Chatty's eye and laughed before she could help herself. Cousin Ernestine looked at her disapprovingly. I've heard you were a great girl to laugh. Well, I hope it'll last, but I'm afraid it won't. I'm afraid you'll find out all too soon that life is a melancholy business. Ah, well, I was young myself once. Was you really? Inquired Rebecca Dew, sarcastically bringing in the muffins. Seems to me you must have always been afraid to be young. It takes courage, I can tell you that, Mrs. Bugle. Rebecca Dew has such an odd way of putting things, complained Cousin Ernestine. Not that I mind her, of course, and it's well to laugh when you can, Miss Shirley, but I'm afraid you're tempting Providence by being so happy. You're awful like our last minister's wife's aunt. She was always laughing, and she died of a paralytic stroke. The 3rd one kills you. I'm afraid our new minister over at Lowvale is inclined to be frivolous. The minute I saw him, I says to Louisy, I'm afraid a man with legs like that must be addicted to dancing. I suppose he's given it up since he turned minister, but I'm afraid the strain will come out in his family. He's got a young wife, and they say she's scandalously in love with him. I can't seem to get over the thought of anyone marrying a minister for love. I'm afraid it's awful irreverent. He preaches pretty fair sermons, but I'm afraid, from what he said of Elijah the Tidbit last Sunday, that he is far too liberal in his views of the Bible. I see by the papers that Peter Ellis and Fanny Bugle were married last week, said Aunt Chatty. Ah, yes, I'm afraid that'll be a case of marrying in haste and repenting at leisure. They've only known each other 3 years. I'm afraid Peter'll find out that fine feathers don't always make fine birds. I'm afraid Fanny's very shiftless. She irons her table napkins on the right side first and only. Not much like her sainted mother. Ah, she was a thorough woman if ever there was one. When she was in the morning, she always wore black nightgowns. Said she felt as bad in the night as in the day. I was down at Andy Bugle's helping them with the cooking, and when I came downstairs on the wedding morning, if there wasn't Fanny eating an egg for her breakfast, and her getting married that day. I don't suppose you'll believe that. I wouldn't if I hadn't seen it with my very own eyes. My poor dead sister never ate a thing for 3 days afore she was married, and after her husband died, we were all afraid she was never going to eat again. There are times when I feel I can't understand the Bugles any longer. There was a time when you knew where you was with your own connection, but it ain't that way now. Is it true that Gene Young is going to be married again? Asked Aunt Kate. I'm afraid it is. Of course, Fred Young is supposed to be dead, but I'm dreadful afraid he'll turn up yet. You can never trust that man. She's going to marry Ira Roberts. I'm afraid he's only marrying her to make her happy. His Uncle Philip once wanted to marry me, but I says to him, says I, Bugle, I was born, and Bugle, I will die. Marriage is a leap in the dark, says I, and I ain't going to be drug into it. There's been an awful lot of weddings in Lowvale this winter. I'm afraid there'll be funerals all summer to make up for it. Annie Edwards and Chris Hunter were married last month. I'm afraid they won't be as fond of each other in a few years' time as they are now. I'm afraid she was just swept off her feet by that dashing ways. His Uncle Hiram was crazy. He believed he was a dog for years. If he did his own barking, nobody need have grudged him for fun of it, said Rebecca Dew, bringing in the pear preserves and the layer cake. I never heard that he barked, said Cousin Ernestine. He just gnawed bones and buried them when nobody was looking. His wife felt it. Where is Miss Lily Hunter this winter? Asked Aunt Chatty. She's been spending it with her son in San Francisco, and I'm awful afraid there'll be another earthquake before she gets out of it. If she does, she'll likely try to smuggle and have trouble at the border. If it ain't one thing, it's another when you're traveling. But folks seem to be crazy for it. My cousin Jim Bugle spent the winter in Florida, and I'm afraid he is getting rich and worldly. I said to him before he went, says I remember it was the night before the Coleman's dog died, or was it? Yes, it was. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall, says I. His daughter is teaching over in the Bugle Road School, and she can't make up her mind which of her beaux to take. There's one thing I can assure you of, Marionetta, says I, and that is you'll never get the one you love best. So you better take the one as loves you. If you can, be sure he does. Phew. The way they write, it's kind of hard to read at times. I hope it's all making sense, though. All right. But if you can, be sure he does. I hope she'll make a better choice than Jessie Chipman did. I'm afraid she's just going to marry Oscar Green because he's always round. Is that what you've picked out? I says to her. His brother died of galloping consumption. And don't be married in May, says I, for May's awful unlucky for a wedding. How encouraging you always are, said Rebecca Dew, bringing in a plate of macaroons. Can you tell me, said Cousin Ernestine, ignoring Rebecca Dew and taking a second helping of pears, if a calicularia is a flower or a disease? A flower, said Aunt Chatty. Cousin Ernestine looked a little disappointed. Well, whatever it is, Sandy Bugle's widow got it. I heard her telling her sister in church last Sunday that she had a calicularia at last. Your geraniums are dreadful scraggy, Charlotte. I'm afraid you don't fertilize them properly. Miss Sandy's gone out of mourning, and poor Sandy only dead 4 years. Ah, well, the dead are gone soon and forgotten nowadays. My sister wore crepe for her husband's 25 years. Did you know your placket was open, said Rebecca, setting a coconut pie before Aunt Kate. Well, dang, how many sweets they going to eat? I haven't time to be always staring at my face in the glass, said Cousin Ernestine acidly. What if my placket is open? I've got 3 petticoats on, haven't I? They tell me the girls nowadays only wear 1. I'm afraid the world is getting dreadfully gay and giddy. I wonder if they'll ever think of the Judgment Day. Do you suppose they'll ask us at Judgment Day how many petticoats we've got on? Asked Rebecca Dew, escaping into the kitchen before anyone could register horror. Even Aunt Chatty thought Rebecca Dew really had gone a little too far. I suppose you saw old Alec Crowdy's death last week in the paper, sighed Cousin Ernestine. His wife died 2 years ago. Literally harried into her grave, poor creature. They say he's been awful lonely since she died, but I'm afraid that's too good to be true. And I'm afraid that they're not through with their troubles with him yet, even if he is buried. I hear he wouldn't make a will, and I'm afraid there'll be awful reactions over the estate. They say Annabel Crowdy is going to marry a jack-of-all-trades. Her mother's first husband was one, so maybe it's a hereditary thing. Annabel's had a hard life of it, but I'm afraid she'll find it's out of the frying pan into the fire, even if I don't turn out he's got a wife already. What is Jane Goodwin doing with herself this winter? Asked Aunt Kate. She hasn't been in town for a long time. Ah, poor Jane. She's pining away mysteriously. They don't know what's the matter with her, but I'm afraid it'll turn out to be an alibi. What does Rebecca do laughing like a hyena out in the kitchen for? I'm afraid you'll have to have her on your hands yet. There's an awful lot of weak minds among the Dews. I see Thora Cooper has a baby, said Aunt Chatty. Ah, yes, poor little soul. Only one, thank mercy. I was afraid it would be twins. Twins do run in the Coopers. Thyra and Ned are such a nice young couple, said Aunt Kate, as if determined to salvage something from the wreck of the universe. But Cousin Ernestine would not admit that there was any balm in Gilead, much less in Lowville. Ah, she was real thankful to get him at last. There was a time she was afraid he wouldn't come back from the West, I warned her. You may be sure he'll disappoint you, I told her. He's always disappointed people. Everyone expected him to die before he was a year old. But you see, he's alive yet. When he bought the Holly place, I warned her again. I'm afraid that well is full of typhoid, I told her. The Holly hired man died of typhoid there 5 years ago. They can't blame me if anything happens. Joseph Holly has some misery in his back. He calls it lumbago, but I'm afraid it's the beginning of spinal meningitis. Old Uncle Joseph Holly is one of the best men in the world, said Rebecca Dew, bringing in a replenished teapot. Ah, he's good, said Cousin Ernestine, lugubriously. Too good. I'm afraid his sons will all go to the bad. You see it like that so often. Seems as if an average has to be struck. No, thank you, Kate. I won't have any more tea. Well, maybe a macaroon. They don't lie heavy on the stomach, but I'm afraid if I've ate far too much, I must be taking French leave, for I'm afraid it'll be dark before I get home. I don't want to get my feet wet. I'm so afraid of ammonia. Ammonia instead of pneumonia. She said ammonia. I've had something traveling from my arm to my lower limbs all winter. Night after night, I've laid awake with it. Aw, nobody knows what I've gone through. But I ain't one of the complaining sort. Just a gossiping one. This whole chapter's been about gossip. I was determined I'd get up to see you once more, for I may not be here another spring, but you've both failed terrible, so you may go for me yet. Oh, well. Oh, my gosh. It's best to go while there's someone on your own left to lay you out. Dear me, how the wind is getting up. I'm afraid our barn roof will blow off if it comes to a gale. We've had so much wind this spring, I'm afraid the climate is changing. Thank you, Miss Shirley, as Anne helped her into her coat. Be careful of yourself. You look awful washed out. I'm afraid people with red hair never have real strong constitutions. What are we reading? I think my constitution is all right, smiled Anne, handing Cousin Ernestine an indescribable bit of millinery with a stringy ostrich feather dripping from its back. I have a touch of sore throat tonight, Mrs. Bugle, that's all. Ah, another of Cousin Ernestine's dark forebodings came to her. You want to watch a sore throat. The symptoms of diphtheria and tonsillitis are exactly the same till the third day. But there's one consolation. You'll be spared an awful lot of trouble if you die young. Wow. Wow. What an interesting read today was. Oh, I don't know if I should say, did you enjoy that? That was a lot of drama. Oh, but I do thank you for being here for our storybook adventure, and I do hope that you enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to seeing you next week as we continue reading the Anne of Green Gables series. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you next Sunday for 2 more chapters. And until then, be joyful and be the joy in everything you do. All right, nugs and joy. Mwah. Love you. Bye.